Hello there, and welcome into the Booberg Lawcast. My name is Jay McFarland. I'm so glad you decided to join us today because I promise you, when it's all said and done, you're going to know exactly what to do if you're ever in a car crash. Now, of course, we don't want you to be in a car crash, but we want you to be as prepared as possible when and if that happens. And by the time we're done today, Chris is going to give you some very actionable information to help protect yourself and to help recoup any expenses that you have and to aid the healing process. So as always, let's bring in our attorney, Chris Booberg. Chris, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for helping me out with this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm so glad to do it. And I'm so excited about this topic today. I really feel that people go into, we don't prepare for a car accident, really. And so I'm excited to talk about this. But before we dive into that, tell everybody why law, why an attorney, and why personal injury? What drove you in this direction?
Well, I think I'm a lawyer because my grandfather was a lawyer, and I always looked up to him and respected him. He was the head of personnel for the RF&P Railroad here in Richmond for many years, and he was following the line of his father, who had worked as a laborer on the railroad. He was the first person in his family to go to college, and obviously the first person to go to law school too. I was always very proud of him. And I also wanted to do public service because of my mother and my father. My mother's a teacher, and my father worked for a nonprofit health agency. So they always taught me that it's good to help people out with the talents that you're given. And so when I decided to go to law school, which was basically because my mom reminded me when I was in college that I had said I always wanted to go to law school, and she arranged the interview. So thanks,
Wow.
of course, to my mom. For, everything comes from your mom.
Yeah.
I started out doing criminal defense because I wanted to take on big institutions. I wanted to represent individuals. I didn't want to represent corporations. I didn't want to represent insurance companies. I wanted to represent people so that I could affect their life one-on-one. But I got away from criminal defense because it's just so emotionally difficult. And a friend of mine had an opening at a workers' compensation firm here in town. And I went there and I really liked it because I could still represent individuals. I could help them out when they've been injured. And then I branched off and added in personal injury, which is mostly car accidents and slip and fall type cases, and also Social Security disability. And in all of those cases, I'm representing an individual who needs help in battling and navigating their way through a system.
Well, it's interesting. It really sounds to me like you're a true believer. This wasn't a decision that you made because you felt like personal injury was a great way to make a ton of money.
There are easier ways if you're a lawyer. There's definitely places where you could go, and every time you work for an hour, you could bill $350, $400, $500. But the nice thing about doing personal injury is you don't have to take money out of anybody's pocket in order to represent them because all the cases are on a contingency. So I'm putting in work based on my belief in myself and my belief in the case that we will be able to win or we will be able to achieve a settlement. And I like it that way. I like to get paid by insurance companies instead of by individuals.
That is interesting. I think that, like I said, it does sound like you are a true believer, but you've also structured your practice in such a way that you can really provide that one-on-one service and people not get engulfed by this massive law firm or corporation.
That's a very good point. I worked for a larger personal injury firm here in town, and I got a lot of great training there. I had a lot of good experience and worked with a lot of good people. But the problem was there were layers there. There were investigators, there were paralegals, and often you talk to them before you even talk to me. And when you call Booberg Law, I got a text from a person today who saw my number online, and we texted, and I signed him up as a new client. He's not having to go through my assistant. He's not having to go through an investigator or anybody else. You send a text and I respond, the guy who's going to handle your case. And it's also, I think it helps me become closer to the case. I'm working with the client from the very beginning. So I know the facts of the case. I know what's happened in the case because we have been working closely one-on-one, not through another party.
Now, I also know, just having gotten to know you, that you also had an incident in your youth with a personal injury that has affected your lifetime. And I'm sure that informs your perspective and how you fight for your clients.
Well, it definitely left me not having a lot of faith in insurance companies
Mm,
and in auto accidents in general. When I was 16, I was riding a bike with a friend of mine, and I was hit by a car, and it
mm,
broke my leg and all the way through both bones of my lower leg, threw me into the windshield. Fortunately, I was wearing a helmet because the helmet hit on top of the car and was broken, and I think either saved my life or saved my brain or both.
wow.
And unfortunately, while I was lying there waiting for my leg to be set, the police officer, the trooper who was in charge of investigating the case, came in and told me what he thought had happened and said, "Don't you agree with that?" And I'm in
Mm.
pain. I'm a young kid, and I'm kind of taught to, police officers are on your side. And so, of course, I say, "Yeah, I guess that's what happened. I'm in a lot of pain here. I don't know what's going on." And then later, I talked to my friend. He said, "That's not what happened at all." But unfortunately, because I had given that statement and because the police officer prepared his report the way he did, I didn't have any claim. And so I'm left with a permanent injury that's a reminder every other step of what it's like to be hurt, what it's like to be hurt when it's somebody else's fault, and what it's like to have a permanent injury. And so I think I can relate sometimes a little better maybe than somebody else can to somebody who's going through this because I've been through it and it affects me every day.
Well, and I think that also speaks to your desire to do these types of broadcasts where you're giving away free information to help prepare people because you were not prepared. And if somebody had just given you some simple advice, very different time back then. You didn't have the internet, you didn't have this ability, but it could have changed the entire outcome if you would have known just a few key things.
That's exactly right. I feel like the reason that I'm doing these videos and that I'm doing videos on YouTube and on Instagram is I'm trying to hit on key issues that people need to know not to mess up their case. And I would much rather a person be informed and that I be a resource for them, even if they don't hire me. I want to have those videos out there so that they can deal with the insurance company. If they choose not to talk to an attorney or they feel like they don't want to have an attorney, at least they can have some insight into the process and they can know these are things you've got to do and these are things that you shouldn't do. And by the same token, I've prepared a couple of sheets that I send out to people, e-documents, that have my top tips for workers' comp, for Social Security disability, for personal injury, for car accidents. And I've got them in English and in Spanish. So if somebody emails me, I send that to them right away. They don't have to sign up with me, nothing like that. I just want to get the information out there so that people can be taken care of and people don't end up in the hands of the insurance company with a potential negative outcome.
Well, and we're going to talk about this as we talk about what to do in a car accident. Some of the first steps that you make, some of the first key steps could define the entire outcome of your case. And so let's dive into that. Let's talk about somebody was just in a car accident. What are the first steps that they should take to ensure that if they are going to file a claim or if they're going to fight the insurance company, that they're in the best possible situation?
The first thing you've got to do is call the police. And I know some people don't want to. You don't want to get involved with the police. It's going to take a longer time. Maybe it doesn't even seem like that big a deal. But one of the most important things we send to the insurance company when we have a claim is the police report. And so they insist on a copy of it. They're not going to pay out a claim without the police report because the police officer will investigate. He may give a ticket to the other party, which is a big deal. But they prepare a little chart, a little diagram of how the accident happened, where the various cars were. They take statements from both drivers, and they take statements from any witnesses that were there. So even if you have a tendency not to want to involve the police in your life, and even if the other guy seems like the nicest person on earth and says, look, I'll just pay this out of pocket, we don't have to involve the police, you've got to. You've got to get a police report prepared. You've got to have the police investigate it. The other thing is we all have cameras on us all the time now. Take photographs of the scene. I had a case involving a client, and the accident happened when she was moving into a lane, a turn lane around another person. And the other person said, no, that's not how it happened. And the police officers arrived on the scene. My client was smart enough to call the police, and they took some photographs, but they didn't take photographs of precisely where the cars were when you were looking at the street. Fortunately, my client took the time to take pictures not only of the top of the cars, where they were, how they had come to rest together, but she had some street view photos. And when we showed those to the judge, I really think that helped us win the day because she was able to see that my client was where she was supposed to be based on the lines on the street and that the other person wasn't.
So those pictures made all the difference then.
They absolutely did. I'm convinced they won the day for us. See, we probably could have won without them, but once the judge saw those, you could see the demeanor of the judge change, and the judge realized that she was going to rule in our favor. At least that's how I felt, and that I could see the impact in the body language of the judge once she saw those photos.
Well, fortunately, we live in a time when we're all carrying cameras around. I remember a time when people would advise you, keep a camera in the glove box in case you're in an accident. Now you have a camera, so why not take the extra little bit of time to document the scene?
That's exactly right. And like my client, you need to do it before the cars are moved. Sometimes if you're in a busy area, the rule is that you're supposed to not block up traffic, but you need to document where the cars came to rest because we're going to have to kind of back up from there to figure out what was going on before to figure out who's at fault. So it's very important before you move the cars, make sure you get a photo of where they are in the street from all angles. You can't ever take too many pictures.
Well, so call the police, then start taking pictures. So then
That's exactly right.
So then what happens, Chris, if you're injured, you're carried away to the hospital, then do you lose that documentation? Is there a way around that?
You mean if
you're in a car accident and you're taken to the hospital, so you don't have time to take pictures and document the scene?
I see what you're saying. Unfortunately, sometimes that is lost, and people who are seriously injured and critically injured and go away in a helicopter or an ambulance, sometimes they don't have that opportunity. But sometimes they have a friend with them. Sometimes they have a witness who they will give a card to and say, please take some photographs and please document this for me. So I've had that happen in cases. But obviously, if you're incapacitated, you just have to make do as best you can.
You can't do that. So then I guess my next question is, I'm in the accident. I've documented it. I've called the police. And now I'm questioning, I don't really feel any pain, or I just have a little sore neck or something. Do I really need to go to the doctor? I feel fine. So do you recommend going to the doctor every time, or how does that work?
Well, I'm not a doctor. You're not a doctor. The vast majority of my clients are not doctors. So you don't know exactly how you are. I was hit in a low speed accident one time on a local road here called Broad Street, just rear-ended by a lady. But it was enough that it knocked my telephone out of my hand when I was talking on it. And I went to the office and I felt like I was a little out of it. And the other guys at the office fussed at me. They said, what are you doing? First off, you shouldn't be working. There's something going on with you. And you should be smart enough to know that you need to get a medical record. You need to have a contemporaneous evaluation, because by doing that, you're taking away one of the many weapons that the insurance company uses. They love to argue a delay in treatment. Let's say that you get in an accident, you're kind of a tough guy or a tough girl, and you say, look, I don't have time for this. I'm busy. This probably wasn't even that bad. First off, you're probably going to still really start hurting the next day. It's my experience that clients say the next day when the adrenaline has worn off,
right,
and your body has slept and then it's tightened back up again, that's when it really starts hurting. So don't make that decision the first day. Wait until the next day. But if you tough it out for a week or 10 days, and then finally you're like, oh, my shoulder is killing me, I've got to go to the doctor. The insurance company's going to argue, we don't know what happened in those 7 days. We don't know what happened in those 10 days. We don't know if something else happened to him. So what I would say is go to your general practitioner, go to patient first, go to the emergency room if you have to, and tell them every single thing that's bothering you from the top of your head to your bottom of your feet. So there's a record of it, because something may come up that's related to the accident involving a knee or a shoulder or a wrist or an ankle that really wasn't that bad at the time. But if you have a mention of it early in the medical history, then when it comes up 3 months later, we can always point back and say, she did complain about her ankle being sore after the accident. And then it takes away that argument that, well, you didn't report it or you delayed in treatment. And when you delay in treatment, the next argument they say is it couldn't have been that bad, or else they would have gone to medical care.
Yeah, so you're kind of projecting forward. What are their arguments and claims going to be, and you're preempting those along the way. This is why I love the advice, Chris, because I guarantee you, I've never thought in these terms, and I know so many other people out there are not thinking in these terms. And by delaying just a little bit, because we all want to tough it out and be tough, and I don't need a doctor, but you really could be damaging any future claims that you have. So I love that. So now I've called the insurance company and I'm working with them on my claim. When do I make the choice? Like, you know what? I think I'm going to bring an attorney in here, because that's another thing. We don't want to be litigious. We don't want to, I'm not a lawsuit guy. So, is when do I say I need Chris on my side?
I've heard I'm not a lawsuit guy or gal a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
And what I say to people who say that to me is car insurance is one of the few products that the law requires you to have. Think about that. You don't have a choice but to have car insurance or to pay into a risk pool if you want to drive.
Right.
And then at the same time, they've convinced us not to use that product. They've convinced us that our rates will go up. They've convinced us that we shouldn't make a claim. You call in and they try to convince you not to make a claim. That's not the right thing to do. If you pay for insurance and the other party has paid for insurance, then use the insurance. There's no reason, unless you think insurance companies don't have enough money and you want to enrich them, that's fine. But we had a lady who works closely with me, and she got in a car accident and she wasn't going to bring the case. And we were actually just talking about it today, and she ended up getting $12,000 for her case. And she got the medical care that she needed, and she got the compensation that she needed. And it helped her buy a new car, and it helped her recover from the accident. Some friends of mine, I talked to them, and they didn't want to bring their case. And I said, look, I won't even take a fee on this case. I just don't want you to enrich the insurance company. And they ended up doing it, and we got them about $13,000. And that's money that's literally just left on the table. But to go back to your other point, you're saying you're working with the insurance company. I think that was your exact wording.
Yes.
So that means you're talking to an adjuster and you're listening to them. And what you're really doing is you're getting advice from the adjuster. You're getting advice from the other team. If you were playing a game, you wouldn't get advice from the other team's coach. You wouldn't want to do what he's telling you. And the next thing that's going to happen, and I have a saying about this, I tell every single one of my clients, no recorded statements. They're going to ask you for a recorded statement. They're going to say,